Hello and welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn. This is Friday, the end of another momentous week for Celtic Football Club, and I'm joined today by the wonderful Anthony Haggerty and the even more wonderful Jim Orr. How are you, gentlemen?
Very well, thanks.
Good, Laura. Good to be here.
Yes, quite a week, I have to say. I'll come to you first, Jim, because Anthony, obviously you were on the match coverage of the Ross County match, and then on the reaction podcast that we did at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning, was it, when Neil Lennon's sacking was announced? So, Jim, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts? Did you expect the sacking to come after the Ross County match? Were you surprised by it? And what are your thoughts a couple of days on?
Very surprised, in terms of the timing of it. If you look at the last Ross County game, we lost in the League Cup. You'd have thought that's the time to sack him if you're going to sack him. I thought we actually played no bad. Sunday night we should have won the game. We had lots of chances, lost a daft goal. So, yeah, big surprise with them going. I don't think it's a time to celebrate. I think it's a time for sober reflection on what's happened this season. Lots of lessons to be learned. Lots of things that we don't want to repeat. We don't want to have another season like this. So, very surprised they went, and we look forward to the new era, and we'll see how John Kennedy does in his first game in charge tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, I was the same as you. I kind of, it was another kind of result to add to the list, I have to say. And I thought based on that we weren't going to see much change. Anthony, we heard your thoughts about a couple of days on and a bit more time to reflect. As Jim said, it's probably not a time to celebrate, and I think a lot of people are coming to that conclusion more and more as time goes on. So what are your thoughts now that you've had a few days to reflect on it?
It was never a cause for celebration. I said on Wednesday that we shone a light on the deficiencies in the team this season, of which he was a manager and part of that structure, and couldn't get a tune out of them. And there was various points in the season where we felt that the club should have parted company with him. That's on a professional scale. It was never personal with Neil Lennon. It never ever was, and it never ever will be, because he's been a magnificent servant for the club for 20 years or so. So I don't think you can get personal with somebody like that. He's won 21 trophies in his tenure there at the club as both a player and a manager. So I just couldn't understand the vitriol and hatred. I get it, because it was a monumental season in the club's history, but it just all went pear-shaped very early, and the manager's always going to bear the brunt of that, or the fans' ire. But I just, my feelings are the same. You know, a guy has lost his job. Yeah, people say he's been well paid over those 20 years. Yeah, of course he has. But it didn't have to be like this. It didn't have to end like this. And I think the ending, coming as it did, the whole season just throws up more questions than answers. I was looking at kind of Neil Lennon's first tenure and looking at kind of players that were brought in then and comparing it to the players that were brought in the last year, or shaping up for the 10. You know, you had that Kelvin Wilson 2010-11, and going on from there, you'd like Kelvin Wilson, Joe Ledley, Wanyama, Hooper, Van Dijk, Foster. They're all massive guys, right? And you kind of cut back to this year, and it'd be brought in like Barkas, Kramala, Ajeti, Taylor, Sorrell. So we went from kind of land of the giants to land of midgets. Now, I would ask the question, if Neil Lennon thought that the land of the giants 10 years ago were good enough to win titles and stuff, then it maybe Jim's touched on this before about who was bringing in the players this season then. And you contrast those two, then you might think they're no Neil Lennon prototype players. So maybe there's a lot more to be answered on this. Jim's touched on it a lot about not being able to bring in his management, the management team he wanted. So if Neil Lennon wasn't allowed to bring in his management team and he wasn't allowed to bring in the players he wanted, who was signing these players? And if that's the case, that it wasn't him and it was Lowell and Nicky Hammond, then Hammond should fall on his sword as well. He has to be cleared out the place too. And this is not a thing. Go on, Jim. Go on.
No, I think that's the point I was trying to make about trying to learn lessons.
Yeah.
A lot of very bad decisions have been made over the past decade. If they pinpoint all those decisions, and they all led to this season. It's just unfortunate it was this season that led. It could have been last season, it could have been next season. It's just unfortunate it came to this season. If you take all the emotion out of it and you take Neil Lennon out of it, as they keep saying in football, it's a results-driven business. And there was that period where they won, was it 2-12 or 3-12 or something like that?
Yeah.
Any other club, any other season, that's where he goes. And as I said last week, the fact that the board didn't twist at that point, that's when you put the blame on the board. And as I said, hopefully, moving forward, whatever structure that they have, whatever vision that they have, they can't repeat some of the stuff they've just done there. And no doubt we'll go on to talk about Don Mackay at some point in time. I don't think Don Mackay will be much different, to be perfectly honest. But I think what you're looking for Dermot Desmond to do is draw a big, thick, white line, and it says, that side of the line's football, and that side's non-football. And you just stick to the non-football line, pal. Because I don't really see Don Mackay being all that much different from Peter Lowell. In terms of, if you're saying that Don Mackay can bring things to the club, by implication, does that mean Peter Lowell couldn't have brought those things to the club? I don't think so. I think Peter Lowell's, it was his time to go. He maybe should have went a wee bit sooner. He's not been looking that well, to be that on the season. 61, which images me. And I could maybe look 60 in a kind of bad light. So maybe it was time for him to go.
But I agree with you. I think clear delineation has to be made when Dominic Mackay comes in, football department and the other department, So
yeah, so I think thanks everybody for your comments.
I think it's also actually
sorry, Jim. I was just going to say thanks to everybody for your comments coming in. There's a lot of people agreeing with what Anthony's saying. There needs to be cleaner ties cut with some of the people who are in there. And to go back to you, Jim, do you think that people are starting to reflect on it a little bit more now and see that Neil Lennon might have been the head of the beast, if you want to put it that way, but actually there's a lot more underneath that's a problem that needs to be rooted out as well?
Absolutely, Laura. I think as time goes on, we'll find out a bit more about what actually happened. I mean, the bottom line is he's the manager. So whatever tools you've got to play with, whatever cards you're dealt with, you have to deal with them. And I think a different manager with a different skill set would have made a better job. And I have got sympathy with Neil Lennon, I've said that before, because of some of the things that's happened. But I think, as you said, Laura, that's what you signed up for. And if you've signed up for that, then on you go and make it happen. And it's the point about, if it's about who killed the 10, it was Mr. Law and the showers with A to Z of Glasgow. That all fell apart because the previous manager was there for the 10 and we let him slip through their hands. And that's that. For me, that's the major reason. But if you go back to the last night, when things happen all the time, you think, that shouldn't have happened. And even if you go all the way back to when Neil Lennon was first appointed, you're thinking, well, that shouldn't have happened either, because he quite plainly wasn't the best man for the job. So we have to learn lessons, because we seem to keep repeating the lessons, or we keep repeating the mistakes, and we don't learn the lessons. And one of the things that's been galling has been how poor we've been in Europe for the past 10 years, and how late we leave the signings, and how we make it for ourselves. I mean, things that are out with our control, there's not much you can do. But lots of the mistakes that we've made were within our control. Dubai being the most recent example of such a stupid thing to do. So we have to be a bit clever in terms of what we do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think every Celtic fan watching this must accept that a lot of the issues that we've faced this season have been of our own making, not least trips to Dubai and things of that nature. I think Neil Lennon, as time goes by and as people reflect more on it, they're probably going to feel a little bit more like this was a man under extreme pressure who maybe didn't behave in the most appropriate ways at times. But, that's unfortunately, the way things happen in terms of responding to the pressure that you're under, we all would respond differently and don't know how we would respond in that setting. Anthony, I was talking to you before we came on air about the nature in which the news broke, and I understand you had some issues with some of the comments that were made around the way that it was broke and the way that it got out into the public domain.
Aye, I've got a bugbear about this. The story was leaked to the Sun, and I'm going to speak as a former journalist here, because that story was not leaked to the Sun. The Sun got the story first because the journalist in question was a guy called David Field, who's a very good professional and a very good professional doing a very good professional job, and he got it first. He got what's known in journalistic terms a good old-fashioned scoop. These things come along because you've nurtured a contact and you've cultivated that contact over a number of years, and they trust you with a story like that because it's so big. So it's a bit disingenuous for this lazy narrative that I've heard on this programme and other people saying that the story was leaked to the Sun. It wasn't. It was good old-fashioned journalism, and regardless of what people think of that in this country, they all have their thoughts. They all have their thoughts on that newspaper. That's how journalism works. There are good professionals doing a solid job, and I just have to say that as a former journalistic professional myself, it's insulting to me when people say, "Oh, that's just spoon-fed," or "That's, they were just handed that," because that's just genuinely not how it works. And there's a kind of, there's this phrase, lazy journalism. Well, there's can be a lazy narrative and a lazy way of addressing this. There's a guy there went out and got a right good scoop of a story, and I think as journalistically goes, it's the one everybody wanted. And yeah, you can turn around and have a pop at me and say, I'm defending my former creed and my former profession. I am, because there are good, honest, hard-working, diligent people working in the profession, and everybody has an opinion on them, and that's fine. But when they do a good job, I think it's sometimes you have to recognise that. Your man got the scoop. He got the scoop for the Sun newspaper. That's how it works. Because if Celtic wanted to leak that, then I don't think they would have leaked it to a newspaper per se. They might have leaked it to all the newspapers or a broadcasting outlet to get the message out there quickly. So I think you have to turn around and say, hat tip to the Sun and David Field in particular. And it's just good old-fashioned journalism. So that was the point I wanted to make on that. And I've been in that movie before myself, when you've got something decent and explosive and, and you feel proud of it. So that was all I wanted to say.
Yeah, Jim, just to come to you, we're getting a lot of comments through, like this one from Tommy R, defending the Sun is not on. I think to be fair to Tony's point of view here, it's not necessarily about the organisation that you're talking about. We all know the history the Sun have got amongst football supporters, and there's an understandable disdain for the publication. But I think we do suffer from, at times, a little bit of a lack of understanding of how things work in a certain profession. Anthony's got much more knowledge of how that works than any of, or than a lot of people. Do you think we suffer a little bit from not taking things on board on a personal level, and the fact that somebody at the end of the day is being a professional and doing their job?
We're all guilty of that, and we're guilty of that just now. And what Tony's just said there is an informed opinion. He's been in that job. He knows what it's all about. So he knows what he's talking about. When we're on here, the guests are on the pod, opinions, and it's no more than opinions. We don't know all the facts. When we've been harsh on the manager, maybe there's lots of other mitigating circumstances we don't know about. And that's what we all do, and I suppose that's the fun of it. And that's down to a lot is down to social media. I mean, social media is just full of stuff and people making up stuff. So we all give our opinions. The story was going to come out at some point in time. Are we getting that bothered at where it came out from? Not really.
No, I think you're entirely correct on that point. I think I saw it from obviously the Sun was the main source that made the scoop, but you saw it from various other organisations and outlets. And like you say, at the end of the day, these journalists are doing a job and have a responsibility to report what they find. Anthony, do you think that there's any situation in which as a former journalist yourself, you would have had information like that and kept it to yourself, or is that not at the end of the day the purpose of the job that you're in, is to get the scoop and make it known?
Yeah, that's the purpose of the job you're in. Something like that would never hold. Certainly in the advent of social media, you'd have to get that out right away. And when I first started, you would have kept that for the next morning's newspaper. So it would have appeared on the Wednesday morning, as the back page. But because of the nature of social media, if someone tells you something like that, or you gain information like that, you just have to run with it. You go with your editor and say, look, I've got this, it's a bona fide source. And they say, right, run with it. So which is what has happened here. And I'm people are going off the nut about praising the Sun. I'm not praising the Sun per se. I'm praising the actual rudiments of journalism. It doesn't matter if the Sun journalist got it, or the Daily Record got it, or the Daily Mail got it. I'm talking about good old-fashioned journalism and the way it works and the operations behind that. This guy got that story. He worked for that newspaper. He put it out there first. That's how it works, So, and that's journalist duty. That's their job, to get stories. And if you're the first to get them, then kudos to that, So everybody wants. But I agree with Jim. Does it matter who got it first? But I just think there's been a narrative crept in that it was leaked by Celtic and this and that. It clearly wasn't. And I'm only giving an informed opinion from my side of the fence, which is what it is. It's an informed opinion, just to let people know.
I think that was all about trying to shoot the messenger rather than the message. So, at the end of the day, it didn't matter.
Correct, aye. Thanks, Jim.
I think a good way to end this particular part of the conversation is to say this. Thanks to Scott Forbes for your comment. Plenty good people have to work for what he calls shady employers on their path through life, then move on. It's not so black and white. And I think we probably need to understand that as far as on an individual basis. But yeah, thanks very much everybody for your comments. The channel that we are broadcasting on, A State of Mind, just hit 10,000 subscribers. I think it was this morning. So thanks everybody. If you haven't followed already, if you haven't subscribed, it's free to do so. You can subscribe on the YouTube channel A State of Mind. You've got A Celtic State of Mind is the Celtic output, but there's plenty of other ones. Amy Canavan's got our new Soccer Supernova show. We've got the Salt and Sauce chat show. There's plenty to get involved with, lots of high quality content, and it's consistent as well. What I would encourage everybody to do as well is share the show as well. Just and if there's anybody watching out there, we're live on Facebook, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. And the more people watch, the more people can get involved and make your voice and your opinion known. Moving on a little bit in terms of conversation, Jim, I wanted to come to you first with this. We had an interview with the guys over at Celtic Shared, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is a new initiative being started. We'll get into the main protagonist behind it a little bit more in the conversation, but it's a new initiative being started by a group of fans regarding potentially bringing more Celtic fans' voices under one umbrella to have more of an influence at the club, to hopefully have a louder voice and make our voices known in a way that we haven't been able to do so recently. Jim, you've had experience of similar things in the past with Celts for Change back in the 90s when the club was on its last legs. What are your thoughts on Celtic Shared and how they're going about with things? Did you have a chance to listen to the interview yesterday? What are your thoughts on what they're trying to do?
I did listen to it, yeah. It was actually Saviour Celts I was involved in, but notwithstanding that, I admire anyone who puts their head above the parapet. It's a difficult thing to put your head above the parapet. No matter how well-intentioned you are, people will be down because one man's meat is another man's poison. So I admire what they're trying to do. As you said, back in the 90s, back in the analogue age, to quote Mr. Haggerty there, it was much more difficult. It's much easier now in terms of social media, getting emails, etc., etc. It'll be a tough job. I wouldn't underestimate what's involved in that. If you look at the guys behind the Resolution 12, they've been trying to do that for the last 6 years. Spending a lot of their time, a lot of their life trying to do something that the Celtic board should have done. So I don't think this is something that's going to happen overnight. It might take a wee while to do. I think the other thing about the guys yesterday, and I wrote down what the chap said at the end of it. What he said was basically that he was looking for he said, I've lost it. Oh, he said, should fans have more say in how the club is run? Right, that's a really open question. You have to be quite. It's just starting. We'll see it evolves over time. But I've mentioned before about when you're going to set objectives or something, people use a SMART acronym. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time barred. So, it'd be interesting to know what the specific objective is. What is their aim in this? When you say things like have more of a voice, what does that mean? Does that mean somebody on the board? Will that make much difference at the end of the day? If they achieved their objective, if we'd have had that this season, what kind of difference would that have made this season? So I'm not sure, because I think that would take a long, long time to kind of put together. I have to pull all those disparate organisations together. I think that might prove a bit of a challenge, and maybe there's a simpler way to do that. Because once I've watched it and kind of had a wee think about it, I'm thinking to myself, is there an easy way to do this? If you take the Celtic Trust as an organisation, the GB as an association, the Irish supporters, maybe the season ticket holders, there's maybe half a dozen groups in there. Could you not make a part-time jobs for 6 people, who could represent those groups? Could that be funded by Celtic? Could that be funded by adding a couple of quid on the season tickets? Make that a formal job? Make that something that the guys who get together, maybe get together once a month, Celtic once a month, vote in somebody from each of those organisations, give them a 3-year period. Is there a quicker way of doing this? But to answer the question you asked, I had anyone that puts their head above the parapet and tries to pull something together. It'd be good for the fans to have more of a voice. I always struggle a little bit when you say more of a voice to do what specifically? And how could you actually change things? So it'll be interesting to see how this all works out.
Yeah, I think to pick up on what you said there, I really did enjoy the interview. I thought the guys did a really good thing coming on to such a public platform to voice what their wishes were. I think probably a lot of us are in the same position. It's not entirely clear how they're going to do it, but anybody who's trying to make a change is obviously worth commending. Anthony, Jim's touched on it. Although they were at pains yesterday during the interview to distance themselves from it as a movement being initiated, or a movement primarily to do with the Green Brigade. The Green Brigade is mentioned in their mission statement, and so there is inextricable ties to the Green Brigade there, which is obviously a divisive issue. A lot of fans don't agree with what the Green Brigade do in a lot of senses, and it therefore possibly could become an issue for getting this off the ground if it's on the back foot to begin with. What are your thoughts there? Do you think the inextricable ties with the Green Brigade is going to cause an issue for them going forward?
I think it might. I think that's what maybe jars with a lot of Celtic supporters, that it's Green Brigade led, although there's tie-ins with the Celtic Trust and stuff, but a lot of Celtic supporters maybe don't align with the Green Brigade. And that's your own personal choice. I agree with Jim. I think their mission statement and their intentions are sound as a pound, but how do you actually achieve that? And then, Celtic have always operated without any fan representation on the board, so how do you kick those doors in? But the boys made a fair point yesterday about the fact that they, Celtic supporters, have committed 20 to 30 million this year, with absolutely no say in what's happened. Dermot Desmond, I think, has put in 35 million over 10 years. So when you're equating it financially, then there's something wrong in that dynamic. But again, the people at the top of the board, they're all qualified people in their own right. So who decides who's the best qualified from the fans' representation to get on the board? And what difference will they make, as Jim said? And would they not be would they be seen as troublemakers and only agitating for change when things go wrong, like this season? And some of the way that particular protest was handled wasn't particularly great. So that's the kind of thing that, which led to people saying, the board dismissed them and became antagonistic towards them. So you have to, it's really something that needs thought out. What is the end game here? And I agree totally with Jim. Even if you do get that fan representative, what can they do to influence any policy at Celtic? I just find it all very difficult. It's kind of an idealism, and it's an ideology which sounds great, but the theory and the practice are two different things,
Yeah, this comment from...
I don't think you can argue with wanting to do that.
I can't announce the name, but it's fans on the board will make no difference whatsoever. Michael Charon, who's commenting on Facebook, has said fair's fair, mate. Some of the banners have been great, and I think that's where the divide is. I think a lot of people see the positive that the Green Brigade have done at the games. They've added to the atmosphere. They've created these fantastic tifos. They've put messages across when they've needed to be put across. It's just that not everybody agrees with the messages that have been put across. Jim, sorry, I think there's a bit of a delay on the feed there, so I kind of interrupted what you were saying, but I'll let you carry on.
No, without trying to labour the point, I think you have to be quite specific. What is it you're trying to achieve? If you can paint me a picture by, say, 3 years' time, we expect to have X, Y, and Z. So I understand where we're trying to get to. And even if you pull X, Y, and Z...
Have we lost Jim? Is he there?
Posing there was, if we had that X, Y, and Z this season, would that have made a difference? It's all about trying to let the board know that we're not happy, but the board knew we weren't happy, so it might not make much of a difference.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And that's
true. I think we're in a situation where
I think this is a good idea. Can't argue with the idea. But what's the end point of this, and what's the expectation? I've talked about expectation before to Paul. What are your expectations? So if you set this up?
Yeah, I think Jim makes some good points there. I think, as Anthony, as you've said as well, I think it's about being clear on what the purpose of the movement is and how we're going to achieve it. There is a lot of comments coming through that we can see that are sceptical as to the impact that a fan group could have in a boardroom, especially the way that the club has sort of conducted themselves this season. Especially, we've seen a lot of dismissal of some of the points that have been made. But I think like Jim said, to round it off, it was one of these situations where getting their heads above the parapet is brave to do. But moving on slightly to another slightly divisive figure, just to touch on it. The great, or some might say not the great, Fergus McCann is 80 years old today. So to take a lead from the Celtic social media team, I'm speaking personally, of course, I would like to wish the Bunnet a very happy 80th birthday. Now, Anthony, there is a divide here, very much the same as the Green Brigade, of what impact Fergus McCann had, whether it was a positive one or a negative one. I don't think anybody's disagreeing that there was ways in which he treated certain members of the Celtic family less than stellarly. But there's also the other side of it, where without Fergus McCann, we possibly would be sitting here without a club today. Where do you stand on it? And do you think that there's a basis on which to hold both those opinions at the same time?
Without a doubt, I think Fergus McCann should, the hat tip to him. He's built the modern day Celtic. This is the model which we follow now. And he came in, put the money in, first and foremost, and did save the club. There was elements of his tenure, as you say, he treated certain individuals not great. So that's something that, when you revise the history, is a black mark possibly. But I think everything else that he did for the club, you cannot underestimate what he did for Celtic. And I spoke about it on one of the other podcasts, that the first thing he did say when he came in was, within 5 years, I'll build you a stadium worthy of the name. I'll put a team in the park capable of winning the league. He was a great communicator. When he had to, he spoke to the fans and he told them what he was doing. And I think that's all people want now from the new regime that's coming in, the new CEO, a director of football and a head coach, if that's what it's going to be. Communication. We can live with the odd failure. That's part and parcel of being a Celtic supporter, But as long as the ideas of the plan, me and Jim are advocates, and yourself as well, and a lot of the others, we're advocates of plans. Tell us where we're going. Give us a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. Just give us a timescale. Tell us your objectives and what you're doing. And I think Fergus did that, and he did it very well. And the club owes him a great debt. And the ones that booed him when he was unfurling the flag, the kind of knee-jerk reaction to that. But as history goes on, he's become increasingly a pivotal figure at the club. And we'll tip our bonnet to him today and wish him a happy 80th and hope he's in fine fettle.
Absolutely. Jim, just to reflect, I mistakenly said you were involved with Celts for Change. It was, of course, Save Our Celts that you were involved with. When Fergus came in, did he have the desired impact that you were looking for as part of that movement? And do you think Dominic Mackay can learn anything from that period of time that he can take into his reign to try and take the club forward?
I would say before, during, and after Fergus McCann came in, I'm a total fanboy. 100% Fergus McCann. If only we'd Fergus McCann for the last 10 years. If only we'd Fergus McCann. Because we'd be in a completely different place just now. And what Fergus did exactly what it said on the tin. He came in, he did everything he said he was going to do. He was unpopular because he wasn't trying to be nice to people. He had hard decisions to make, and he made those hard decisions. If he saw things he didn't like Jim Farry, etc., he went in there, he jumped in there, and he sorted things out. And he had Celtic's back. He was there for 5 years. He said he would leave in 5 years. He left in 5 years with quite a few bob. But that's actually fine by me. If only we'd have Fergus McCann for the past 10 years, we would be in a completely different place now. A completely different place. Because he was one guy that would stand up for Celtic. Sorry, Tony.
And the irony is there would probably be fan representation on the board if Fergus McCann was here. Because he was quite an advocate of turning shares over to fans, And as Jim says, he did exactly what he said. And he would have fought everybody, yeah. He was unpopular because of his abrasive style, but he had Celtic's best interests at heart, always.
Well, I think as well, like you say,
always.
He was interested in fans being involved, and that was touched on briefly with the interview yesterday. They were mentioning about fans having shares up on the wall in their houses and things like that, and those are things that, as much as there was just talk yesterday in that interview of trying to gather shares to try and have a bigger impact, those shares mean a lot to the people that own them. They are family heirlooms that will be handed down. I think you're going to have a tough time getting those off of people because they mean much more than just a financial investment in the club. They mean being a part of the club, and I don't think it's something that you can easily prize out of people's hands. What do you make of those comments that were made yesterday in relation to that?
Me or Jim? Sorry.
What I was going to say was to me.
Yes. Yeah, on you go, Jim.
What I've said in the podcast before is the club needs and fair in space. He knew exactly what he was going to do. He knew exactly where he was going to. And that's why Fergus is easily one of the most important people in Celtic's history. And as I said before, he wasn't there to be liked. He made hard decisions. And he had Celtic's back every single time. You may not have liked the way he did some of the things he did, but his heart was in the right place. And his head was in the right place most of the time as well. I go, Tony, sorry.
I think the next statue at Celtic Park should be one of Fergus, to be honest, to represent the new Celtic from 94 onwards when he came in. Just a personal opinion. People might not share that, but I think it's worthy of looking at. But, let's be honest, this is a guy who told Celtic supporters, we can own a part of your club and I want 620 quid for the privilege, right? Which in 94 was a lot of money. right? And the fans were oversubscribed because he communicated and he told them what he wanted to do. You know what I mean? And people were like, wow, you know, they treated him like a messiah. They were like, oh man, this guy, he's rescued the club for a start. So he'd won the fans over by putting in the £9 million originally. But then he said, right, you're going to fund this and I'll tell you how. And he broke it down so we could all understand it. Right, you know, so, and I think that's what the Celtic supporters appreciated first and foremost. He told us all what was going to happen and how we could be a part of it. And you could own, as you say, people still have those shares and frames and stuff, and they're proud of that. They get to go to shareholders' meetings and stuff, and it means a lot to them because they feel part of the club. And I think Fergus got that from the get-go. He knew that, and as Jim said, he was always about Celtic, the best interest of the club, and he had their back and he fought their corner. And that's because deep down he was a Celtic supporter.
Absolutely. Apologies if you saw something on there that was slightly fruitful language. There was a comment that came up there that probably shouldn't have done. But we're going to move on to... sorry, on you go, Jim. On you go.
Just before you finish the Fergus stuff, that Fergus wanted to build a stadium with a 60,000 capacity, and people thought he was mad. Thought he was off his head. At a time where we're getting crowds of 25,000, 30,000, they thought he was off his head. There's a guy called Kay Cassidy who was the chief executive before Fergus came in. He said that under the old board they were going to build the best stadium in Europe. Fergus actually did. That's the point.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing is Fergus did exactly what he came in to do and kept all his promises and was a man of his word. And like we've said, that's something that we could have benefited from a lot in recent years. So happy birthday to the Bunnet. Hope he's in fine faith, like you said. And we'll move on back to the modern day and back to looking ahead. We've got Aberdeen at the weekend, obviously. But before we go on to look at that game specifically, I wanted to talk a little bit about the interim appointment of John Kennedy. Now, for anybody who didn't see, Celtic actually put an interview on their YouTube channel with John Kennedy, just probably to, well, in my opinion, do a little bit of PR spin. There was a lot of footage interlaced of him being very commanding on the training pitch and looking as if he was a man who knew what he was talking about. Anthony, I wanted to come to you first about it, though. There was a couple of interesting comments he made. He said at one point that he was wanting to put his ambition to the side and do what was required to get to the end of this season. Two things. Do you think he was the right appointment at this time? Do you think he should have gone with Neil Lennon? And what do you think he means by putting his ambition to the side? Do you think he's not got ambitions of being the Celtic manager in the future?
I said on Wednesday morning, was that I famously said if John Kennedy was a world-class coach, as people made him out to be, then he's kept it well hidden, and a lot of people might jump on that. You know, I always felt that he would have came to the fore long before now at various junctures. I felt he should have gone with Neil Lennon as well, along with Gavin Strachan. But he's here. Celtic have appointed him interim coach, and he's got 8 games. But I also said that I made it clear that I don't think in no way, shape or form should this be an on-the-job interview for Kennedy to be given the job come the end of those 8 games. I just don't think the fans would buy that. They wouldn't take to it. They wouldn't sell season tickets on the back of that. Regardless of how he does, he could beat Rangers twice, and it's fine. I don't want to see any Celtic manager lose games. I want him to win all 8 if he can. But when this interim tenure's finished, we shake hands with John Kennedy and we go our separate ways. And I include John Kennedy not being part of the new regime. That's my own personal view, because I think he's been there since Dyler's time in the coaching sense, and I've not seen anything to inspire me, to be honest. And maybe John Kennedy himself, going back to his own ambition, personally has ambitions to be the Celtic manager one day, but I don't know. I just think if he'd been trusted, or he is this renowned coach, then he might have come to the fore before now, people say, how can you come to fore as a number 2, a number 3 or a number 4? But you can have a big influence there. And a lot of people say he wasn't a defensive coach, but I think if John Kennedy was part of any defensive coaching setup, then Celtic have been found wanting in that department for a number of years. And if he had a big contribution there, then, it's been lacking. And that's what concerns me, for him being any kind of head coach or the manager of Celtic in the future.
Absolutely. I think he's probably in a situation where who else are you going to get at the moment? We're 8 games to go. Neil Lennon, we were only going to go further down if he stayed in charge, and so we're trying to arrest that as much as we can, while hopefully there's things going on in the background to try and resolve it. Jim, he made another interesting comment in the interview. He kind of stumbled over his words a little bit and had to correct himself, where he said that he was going to try and get the players to believe in what he's doing, and then corrected himself by saying not that they haven't been. Now my suspicion is that they don't believe in what the coaching methods have been, and the question then relies on how much that was down to John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan and how much of that was down to Neil Lennon. How much is likely to change with John Kennedy being in charge? Do you see any great improvement happening with John Kennedy between now and the end of the season? Can he do as he says and get the players to believe in whatever it is he's trying to do?
I think you made a very interesting point, Laura. You said that we don't believe in coaching methods. We don't know that. That's the thing. We don't know what's happening at Celtic Park this season, and that's getting back to the very first point about the story breaking. When we're giving our views on something, we don't know all the facts behind it. John Kennedy has been called a very good coach by the previous manager, by Damien Duff, by Sean Maloney. Lots of people have said he's really good. Now, we don't know why he's not came to the fore yet, but maybe he is really good. I really don't know, and I think he's maybe the right man, right place at the wrong time. I think he's guilty by association. And who's to know whether he actually is a very good coach, but him and Neil Lennon just didn't see eye to eye in things. I mean, for all we know, John Kennedy's coming to see Neil Lennon and say, I think we should do X, Y and Z this weekend, and Neil Lennon, no, we'll do this. I don't, because he doesn't do tactics. And said to the players, on you go and do your own thing. And maybe that's why they didn't seem to look as if they were on the same page. No, because maybe, again, if you put yourself in his shoes, if you think, if you are a good coach and people think you're a good coach and you're not being given the chance to do things, I think you'd be miffed. So maybe that's the case. I don't know. I'm just speculating at that. I think the last 8 games is a chance for him to make his mark. I think he will do some things that are different from what's happened before. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. Like you told me, I don't think it's a good job. I don't think it's going to be a job next season. And it's an interesting one. I'd like to know a bit more about it. And I think by the same token, we'll maybe get to find out a bit more about what happened to Neil Lennon this season. We might find out a bit more about what happened to John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan this season, because it was the case when we did this internal review that Gavin Strachan actually came out of it okay. So who knows what's going on? Yeah.
I think that's the top and bottom of it. Tony, if we see a lot of difference in the way that we play going forward, comments were made on the pod over the last couple of days. I think JP Mason said that he would be pretty disgusted if we saw a major change. That begs the question, if we see the change, will it be because of a poor attitude of the players beforehand, or will it perhaps be that John Kennedy's being allowed to implement ideas that he previously couldn't do under Neil Lennon? Where do you think? Where do you lie on that?
I think I was going to come back to Paul Mason's comments about that if we see a difference in tempo and the players looking as if they're trying more, then I think that would be disgraceful, because they will have chucked it for the previous manager, and cheated not only Celtic but cheated the fans as well. So that's something that we'll all keep a close eye on. I don't wish John Kennedy ill, right? I hope he wins the 8 games. I do. I just, and like Jim, nobody knows what kind of coach he'll be. My own personal thought is, I just don't see him is inspiring enough to become the new Celtic manager, and he might be a great coach. That I might be doing him a total disservice, and I hold my hands up to that. But it's my own opinion. Others might share it, others may not. That's fine. I do wish him success, but I don't wish him anywhere near the manager's chair come the end of this 8 games. But I want him to succeed, and I want him to do well. And if it enhances his own career and he has to go somewhere else and then maybe come back in the future, having earned his spurs and his stripes, then so be it. I would embrace that. But I just don't think his management material, in my eyes at the moment, could be wrong. But yeah, and you might find out from what Kennedy's doing and what the players do that there was a disconnect there, a clear disconnect. So I think everybody's going to be interested in the team shape, the actual formation, the players that he picks, and in an attacking sense, what's different. And we'll be able to pinpoint these things after tomorrow's game against Aberdeen. And I think we're all waiting with bated breath to see just how Celtic approach this game, how they play under John Kennedy, and then some comments and more judgments will be made, or certainly more people will have an opinion on it, not necessarily judgments. Yeah. So that's where I stand on it.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think
also, Laura.
On you go, Jim.
No, I was just going to say there's been a lot of talk about maybe getting Sean Maloney from being head coach. I don't see that at all. I think if you put Sean Maloney's CV, then John Kennedy's is better. And if we're saying we don't want John Kennedy, why would you want Sean Maloney? Because to be honest, I've got no idea what Sean Maloney's doing these days. I know he's assistant manager of Belgium. What does that mean on a day-to-day basis? What's Sean Maloney doing just now? Because I know what Kennedy's doing just now. And for the last 6 or 7 years, every day John Kennedy has been on a training pitch. And everyone likes him. So for me, John Kennedy is certainly a better candidate than Sean Maloney. I'm not saying that John Kennedy get the job. I don't think he should. But I'm a bit confused with the Maloney loving. I don't really get that. Because people are saying things like, oh, he looked good when he was on Sports Scene. Me, you, Tony would look good on Sports Scene talking about stuff. That doesn't get you a job. So I'm a bit confused with that. It's maybe just the fact that he's linked into Martinez. That if Martinez gets it, he could bring Sean Maloney. But I've seen other things, people saying that maybe Sean Maloney should get the job as head coach. I really don't see that. I don't see the evidence of that. And people have been hard on John Kennedy, but Sean Maloney's better. I really don't see that.
I would only take Maloney with Martinez. That's the caveat that I would add with that. I totally agree. I don't see Sean Maloney as first team coach or head coach either. So, and if you're going to compare CVs, then you've made a fair point there. But I wouldn't want either of them to be the head coach. I would take Maloney with Martinez, somebody like that, who's got much more experience at both English Premier League and internationally. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it's one of these situations that has frustrated me as I've looked at a lot of the coverage of who the potential next Celtic manager could be. The idea to me that Sean Maloney and John Kennedy and even people like Maresca or Xabi Alonso are being touted is baffling to me, because it devalues the role of Celtic manager. You're talking about a lot of the names being put forward are people who've not had any experience managing a top flight club, and you're going to bring them into one of the biggest clubs in Europe. Now, people can say we're not anymore, but certainly in terms of pressure and in the local community and the expectation to win every game is something that is going to weigh heavily on any first-time new manager. And I think we're in danger of, like I say, devaluing the position by considering some of the people we're considering. Jim, just to go back to you, let's look ahead to the end of the season. We've had 8 games under John Kennedy. He's playing fast-flowing, entertaining football. He's won against Rangers twice. He's closed that gap and everybody's raving about him. Is he going to be offered the job in the Showers, do you think? Is there any chance of that happening? Or is he going to, is there no situation in which he's going to end up being Celtic manager, do you think?
I think if he was to know the city, then that would certainly change things. No, I think they've already picked the manager. I think the manager's... Right. I think the manager's already been picked. I said last week I'd love it to be a kind of Ralph Rangnick mini-me. Not Ralph Rangnick, he's maybe a bit too beyond this, but there's all these mini-me's. And I saw the Marsh was mentioned. Mm-hmm. And he's a Rangnick mini-me. He's one of these guys it's worked under Rangnick or coached alongside Rangnick. Something like that. And if it had been up to me, I'd have contacted Ralph Rangnick and said, who are the next 2 or 3 guys in Europe that you've been involved with who should be getting a head coach's job, and take his advice and go something like that, along with a director of football as advised by Ralph Rangnick, because he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. So I don't think there's any chance that John Kennedy is going to get the job. But if he does what you said he was maybe do, Laura, what an opportunity missed by not changing Neil Lennon back in October, November. What an opportunity missed. Another lesson, you know.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those situations we just need to wait and see. But I'm in agreement with you, Jim. I hope that there's stuff being done in the background. Anthony Joseph, the Sky Sports reporter, seemed to confirm that director of football structure is what's going to be going ahead next season. So you would hope as part of that Dominic Mackay is being consulted on that appointment, and then the director of football and him can work towards an appointment of a manager for the future. Moving on to Saturday, it's our job here on a Friday to plunge ourselves in the deep end and make predictions about lineups and results and all that kind of thing for matches. It's a strain that you don't get Monday to Thursday, but here we go. We're on a Friday, so it falls to us. Anthony, we've got Aberdeen at home tomorrow, although the significance of home and away is kind of questionable at the moment. Aberdeen don't seem to have improved greatly since the last time that we played them. I think there's something like 1 win in their last 8 games. I'm sure there's a lot of Aberdeen fans will be as frustrated with Derek McInnes as we have been with Neil Lennon in recent months. First of all, what do you see happening tomorrow? Do you see major changes to the lineup or to the tactics or anything like that because of John Kennedy's new ideas, or do you think it will be much of a muchness from now to the end of the season?
I think he could buy himself some goodwill by just going with 2 up front for a start, you know, and giving the fans in the midfield Turnbull and Sorrow, you know, things like that. Just things that we've been calling for on this pod, you know, and trying to set about Aberdeen. And you stopped short of saying it, but you were going to say it. See if we can get a rip-roaring, free-scoring, never boring Celtic.
I'm struggling to remember the exact quotes, so I left it to you.
And you would wish that for him. I don't have a downer on Kennedy, you know, as I said just there. I would love him to batter Aberdeen 5-0 and play the way that we all expected us or hoped we would play this season. And as Jim said, you might look upon that. And if he does do that, you will look upon it as a missed opportunity, because you could have arrested the slide earlier in the season. You know, and I do wish him well. And I hope that, I'm not saying these things have any great bearing, but I hope they do listen, because the fans have been screaming out for two men up front all season. You know, guys like Turnbull and Sorrow to be extended running the team, keep the likes of Welsh in the team. You know, so if he does things like that, then you'll see that, okay, he's obviously viewing it as a supporter as well, or he thinks he knows what we need. And I think that's what we need. We want to end the season on a flourish, so that any new guy watching can say, right, I know what I'm working with here. You know, so that's the hope, that they are doing their due diligence behind the scenes. There are people watching, and I agree with Jim. I think the new man has been picked out. He'll be watching these 8 games with relish, you know, with great interest, and hopefully Kennedy does things that he can come in and say, right, we did this, I like that, or I like the look of that. But you know, it's a chance for Kennedy just to give us something to cling on to, you know, and to hope. And the hope now is that we can defeat Rangers in 2 games and reel off 8 out of 8. Can he do it? Then his quest starts tomorrow. And I'll go back to it. I wish him well.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anybody watching this or contributing that doesn't hope for the best for whoever the Celtic manager is, whether it's Neil Lennon, John Kennedy, or anybody in between. Jim, do you agree with Anthony? Do you think Do you think John Kennedy's aware of what the fans want? Do you think that's something he's going to deliver, or is he going to go by his own standards? Is he going to go with his own ideas, or do you think he is aware of what the fans are after and is going to deliver that?
Again, that's a good question. I think if I was John Kennedy, I'd make 4 or 5 changes. I'd play a different shape quickly, 5 or 6, and then I would say, that's what I'm talking about. That's why I stick at B in earlier in the season. Just do something completely different. Put your own stamp on it. I mean, we're definitely going to get second place, so it doesn't matter if we drop some points here and there. I would try and put, if I was John Kennedy, I'd try and put my own stamp on it. Bring back Barkas, maybe go 3 at the back, maybe change the formation and definitely go 2 up front and just kind of go for it. And if he was to do something like that and win convincingly, all the people that are saying maybe there's not much to John Kennedy, they might maybe change their opinions a wee bit. So I think that's what I would do. Whether he does that or not, that's a different thing. But I would like to see him do something like that.
Absolutely. Jim raised an interesting point there about bringing Barkas back in. He's one of the players who has not had a great season so far. You can put Haggerty, Klimala and various others in the same bracket. Anthony, do you think that there's a way back for any of those players? Are these last 8 games in the season going to be an opportunity for them to restamp their claim to the shirt? Or do you think for a lot of those players it's a case of sending them out as quick as possible and starting afresh next season?
I certainly think Barkas and Haggerty might have something to bring to the table. I'm still to be convinced about Klimala, if I'm perfectly honest. But I'm willing to persevere with Barkas and Haggerty. And those 2 guys have maybe got a point to prove in the last 8 games. As Jim said, it's a different voice, it's a different stamp being put on things. So that might help them. You know that it's somebody completely different, and if Kennedy gives them the confidence to go and stake a claim, then go and do it. You know, we're still to be convinced by the likes of Barkas and Haggerty and certainly Klimala, but you've got 8 games to try and, you know, sort of salvage your Celtic career. And if you just show us something, you know, and I think Haggerty possibly could, and I just Barkas has been in the wrong movie all season. You know, just try and be in the right movie. You know, just do the basics, you know, just save the ball or, you know, keep a clean sheet just for yourself, for your own confidence in your own ability, because we know you have ability. It's clearly there, you know, so, or we wouldn't have signed him. So you have hopefully he gets his chance, you know, because I feel for Barkas a bit, but he's done nothing to suggest that you would give him, you would feel confident going forward with him as your number 1. So maybe this is just a wee kind of mini season that he needs to try and convince people, and that Haggerty needs as well. Klimala, maybe not so. You know, and I think everybody's thoughts on Duffy are quite consistent, aren't they? You know, so
yeah. I don't see him last in the course, or certainly being asked back next season anyway. Unless John Kennedy can make somebody into as good as a defender as he was possibly going to be had his life career not been cut short. Jim, you talked about enjoying people putting their head above the parapet and thinking it's a brave thing to do, so I'm going to ask you to do it first. What's your predictions for tomorrow? A comfortable victory or a bit more of a struggle?
No, I think we'll win well tomorrow. I think we'll win maybe 3-1, something like that.
Excellent. Anthony, you get any prediction?
I'll say the same. I think 3-0. Conservative estimate for the rip-roaring, free-scoring, never boring Glasgow Celtic, you know.
Absolutely. Well, we'll make it a treble in that case, and I'll say 3-0 as well, and we'll see where we're at next Friday. It's the only treble we're going to get this season, that's for sure. Thanks very much, everybody, for your comments. It's been another excellent show. It's been a lot to talk about, never boring, never quiet in the world of Celtic. Who knows where we'll be this time next Friday? I sincerely hope it's not with a permanent appointment of John Kennedy, but we shall see. Thanks very much, Jim and Tony, for your time today, and thanks everybody. We will see you again very soon.